Kakadosh, Boker Tov. In this week's Parashat, we have the death of Aharon Akuen's children. And it was a very sad story. Obviously, we have Nadav of you that they pass away. And Vaidom Aharon keeps quiet. What exactly does this mean that he kept quiet? What is so great about accepting suffering besimcha, with joy, with happiness, keeping quiet? What is so great about this? So there's an Or HaChaim HaKadosh. The Or HaChaim HaKadosh says in Bereshit Memvav Zayin on the pasuk Vayavo Mitzrayim Yaakov v'chozero ito. Yaakov comes to Mitzrayim, him and all his children with him. Then the next pasuk says, right? Banav uvnei banav v'benotav uvnei banav v'chozero. He brought them to Mitzrayim. One second. You just told me that everyone came to Mitzrayim. So then what does that say? His children, he brought them to Mitzrayim. You already said that they came to Mitzrayim. So the Or HaChaim HaKadosh says, why is it mentioning it again the second time, Banav Ubnei Banav? And what does it say? You already told them that he brought them to Mitzrayim. So says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, listen to the words very carefully. Says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, some of them came, birtzonam, with their will, down to Mitzrayim, because that was the decree of the king. So therefore they came, and they didn't want to stop. They went right away. They came down to Mitzrayim. Other ones, right? They had to be forced to come down to Mitzrayim, which means they didn't really want to come. But, they were forced. They had to come down. So therefore, it says Or HaChaim HaKadosh, what is the Ed Ne'eman to this? It says, we know that when it says, V'yamot Yosef v'cholecha v'chol adorahu, when Yosef died in all the generation, the subjugation, the shi'abud, didn't start until everybody died from that generation. But 1 second. You had Yocheved, you had Serach Bat Asher. They were from that generation. So therefore, why were they working during the lifetime of Yocheved? Yocheved was born already. So if Yocheved was born, what's the difference? So he says the reason why is because Yaakov Avinu brought them down and they didn't come down willingly. That means if right now they would have come down willingly, so if they came down willingly, they didn't have to, the subjugation, the working in Mitzrayim, the being slaves, didn't come during their lifetime. But if they were forced to come down, then they did start the subjugation during their lifetime. That's a chidush of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, and that's what the Zohar HaKadosh explains. In the pasuk, Asher shel Yaakov be'ezro, sivro al Adonai Elohav. What does that mean? He comes and he says, that if they would have accepted the Gezerah, the Simcha, there wouldn't have been any subjugation whatsoever. Just like the Or HaChaim HaKadosh says, because it's not written in the Torah how much is the shibud going to be. So they could have been subjugated for 1 day. They would have been slaves for 1 day. And from the Raya of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, we have an Ed Ne'eman, Yocheved and Serach Bat Asher, right? That they were subjugated. What's going on? So the Yocheved says the Mabit in Bet Elokim that she lived for 250 years until Bnei Yisrael came into Eretz Yisrael. Which means that if Benot Yaakov, if the daughters of Yaakov would have accepted upon themselves the Gezerah, they would have accepted upon themselves this decree, there wouldn't have been any type of subjugation whatsoever. Think about it. They would have been in Egypt the entire time, and they wouldn't have been working. They wouldn't have been slaves in Egypt. So imagine what that is, right? Why? Because Gezerat Melech Beratzon, when you come, right, and you accept the decree of HaKadosh Baruch Hu willingly, the shi'abud goes away. Kisama di Yisure kabule, because the remedy against Yisurim is if you accept the remedy. If you accept the Yisurim, that's the biggest concept against it. If you accept it, that's it. Accept it. Once you accept it, there won't be any type of Yisurim, because that in itself is the acceptance of it. So now you see that Bnei Yisrael were subjugated between 87 years. Some people say it could be even until 116 years, but it for sure was around usually 87 years. Because we say that when Miriam was born, by Mareru et Chayehem b'avodah kasha, that was when Miriam was born. And Miriam was 87 at the time that Moshe Rabbeinu was 80 years old when he went in front of Paro. So therefore she was 7 years older than Moshe. But during the lifetime of Miriam, that's when they started the Shibud. So it's a minimum of 87 years, but maybe it was even before. But then when it got much more stressed, and that's why they called her Maror, Mamash by Mareru, Miriam, right? That they made her life bitter, right? So therefore they called the daughter Miriam. However, though, it could have been maybe 116 years, according to one of the Midrashim. But one second, but it's written there that you were going to be there for 400 years. So if they would have come and they would have accepted everything b'simcha, imagine what would have happened. They could have lived throughout the entire Egypt without one subjugation, without one, even for one day. They would have been slaves. That's it. One day. That's it. If they would have accepted it b'simcha. Now think about how many negative things happened in Egypt. You know what that is? They started crying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because they came and they started subjugating them. At the beginning, it was only the king. Afterwards, it became even the people of the country, as the Gaon brings down. Right? They came and they made them work all their strength. Right? Whoever didn't finish, they also killed them. Or they killed the children. They put the children into the blocks. All the decrees. They went and they made them sleep in the fields so that way they wouldn't be able to live with their wives. They didn't want them to have children. Right? They went and they were Moshechlem or Orla. They came and they made them grow like like big things on their hair. Right? They came and they used to wake them up in the middle of the night not to sleep. Here I have a list of pages and pages of all the different things that they did. Right? That it's just incredible. You understand? Mamash, they cause them all suffering, all sicknesses, all everything. You know what that was? And everything, all these things, an entire list, could have been saved all for one thing. If we would have accepted upon ourselves to go down with simcha. Meaning this is the decree. Accept it. And if you would accept it, there's no problem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu already takes away the Yisurim. And I think that's one of the biggest messages that we have to actually pay attention to in this world. You understand why? Because every single human being has some type of suffering or some type of a calamity. Everyone has their package, right? They say everyone has their own pekelach. Everyone has their own, bag. Everyone has their own, something bad. Accept it, and if we accept it, it actually sweetens it. That's what the Kilushat Levi of Levi Yitzchak Mibarditchev, he actually comes and he says that when a person comes and they accept upon themselves the deen, that in itself is the biggest melitz yosher, it's the biggest advocate for them, that it sweetens the deen. It sweetens the justice against them, and now all of a sudden, it's taken away. Why? He accepted it. And once they accept it, that's it. There's nothing what to do. And it's something incredible. I think it's musar for us, because this in essence is what we are supposed to accept upon ourselves. Think about all the suffering that would have been saved if they would have just accepted it upon themselves, and that's it. Think about it. Yocheved was alive until they went into Eretz Yisrael. Serach bat Asher, she was alive at the time. So therefore, why did the subjugation start? And the answer is what we just mentioned, because they were forced to go down to Egypt. And the other ones, they came willingly, meaning the children, they came down willingly. So the children that came down willingly, as long as one of them was alive, and that's when Levi was still alive, he was the one that died last. So for what happened? No subjugation. But the second that it was going to be Barav, Novotav, and all those things, the ones that they came by force, they didn't have the protection. They had to work. They had to be subjugated. They had to do that. Aaron Kohen, his biggest weapon was Vaidom Aaron. Accept the justice. Accept the Midat Adin, and you keep quiet. You keep quiet. You don't even think about it. And that's it. And that was so powerful, right? That we're saying now is that it takes away all types of suffering whatsoever afterwards. I hope, Bezrat Hashem, that we are actually able to internalize this message, and we're able to accept upon ourselves everything that Hashem throws at us in order that He sweetens the justice. And Bezrat Hashem, we will be saved, that we won't have any more calamities or any more suffering whatsoever, Bezrat Hashem.